Jack was just an ordinary delivery man, working for a modest local restaurant called Midnight Diner. The restaurant did well at night, catering mostly to the nearby St. Mary's General Hospital, a massive medical complex that looked new on the outside, but always gave Jack an unsettling feeling every time he stepped inside. Night after night, he'd navigate the sterile hallways, dropping off food to exhausted nurses, graveyard shift doctors, and occasional family members who spent the night watching over their loved ones. Yet, no matter how new the equipment looked, the air inside the hospital felt oddly heavy, as if the walls themselves remembered things they shouldn't. One particularly gloomy night, near 11 o'clock, Jack received an unusual order. It contained only a single line, 13th floor, surgery observation room. He frowned immediately. There was no 13th floor in the hospital. He was sure of it. Many buildings skipped the number entirely due to superstition. Maybe it was just a prank. But the address and phone number on the order matched perfectly. After debating for a moment, curiosity outweighed suspicion. Jack packed the meal, put on his uniform jacket, and set out. At the hospital entrance, the security guard, who usually ignored him, gave him a cold, knowing look. Without a word, he tilted his head, motioning Jack inside. The automatic doors slid open with an almost reluctant hiss. In the elevator, Jack scanned the buttons. As expected, there was no 13th floor. A chill crawled up his spine. He hesitated, then pressed his thumb firmly on the space between the 12 and 14. To his disbelief, the button beneath his finger clicked. The elevator jerked, shuddered, and began its slow, creaking ascent. The digital display flickered wildly before settling on 13F. With a muffled ding, the doors opened. A dim hallway lay before him, illuminated by flickering overhead lights that hummed and buzzed. The air smelled of antiseptic, mold, and something sickly sweet, like rotting meat poorly hidden behind sterile curtains. Jack's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He clutched the warm delivery bag like a lifeline, stepping carefully into the corridor. The doors on either side were tightly shut. Yet, from beneath some, he heard faint moans, sometimes raspy, sometimes childlike. A dirty, yellowed notice board hung crookedly on the wall, plastered with decades-old flyers and handwritten warnings. Their ink bled into unreadable shapes. Disused medical equipment littered the hallway. Rusty IV stands, cracked bedpans, stained sheets. Each step felt like he was trespassing somewhere time itself had abandoned. At the end of the corridor, a crooked sign read, "Surgery Observation Room." Jack hesitated at the door. He could turn back now, but the strange gravity of the place seemed to draw him in. He pushed the door open. The room was empty. Dust floated lazily in the beam of his flashlight, highlighting a rusty operating table in the center. Ancient surgical equipment set abandoned on carts. A thick layer of grime coated everything. On a cracked side table lay a note hastily scrawled. "Place the food on the table and leave. Do not linger." Jack did exactly that. He set the bag down and turned to leave, but a faint rustle made him freeze. He looked back. The lid of the delivery box was trembling, as if something inside was pushing against it. A sliver of pale, glistening flesh slithered over the edge. Jack stumbled back, heart hammering. He bolted for the door, running down the hallway as a chorus of soft, wet sounds echoed behind him. The elevator doors stood open, but refused to close. He jabbed the buttons frantically. The lights overhead flickered faster and faster. The shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch toward him, reaching.
At last, with a reluctant groan, the doors sealed shut. The elevator lurched downward. When Jack stumbled out onto the ground floor, sweat-soaked and breathless, the security guard was nowhere to be seen. The next day, Jack told the restaurant manager about the night's events. The manager's face drained of all color. He leaned in, voice low but firm. "Never speak of this again. If an order like that comes in, ignore it. There is no 13th floor." But Jack couldn't let it go. Night after night, he found himself scanning the hospital's floors, listening for strange noises, peeking into shadows. The hospital's secrets began to reveal themselves in unsettling glimpses. Sometimes he'd hear whispers coming from locked rooms. Sometimes he'd pass by the surgery wing and see garbage bins overflowing with blood-soaked bandages. Once he swore he saw a patient in a paper gown standing motionless in the hallway, staring at him with vacant, milky eyes. Jack's obsession led to old newspaper clippings, local rumors, and late-night conversations with the city's oldest cab drivers. He learned that a decade ago, a disaster struck St. Mary's Hospital. An entire floor of patients and medical staff disappeared overnight. The hospital board erased all evidence, sealing off the floor, bribing officials, and firing any staff who asked questions. One night, Jack tracked down a retired surgeon who'd been on the night shift when the incident occurred. The old man, now living in a cluttered apartment surrounded by stacks of dusty medical journals, listened in silence. Then he whispered, "It's still there. The floor. It waits. You don't find it. It finds you. Do not go back." But the pull was too strong. A week later, Jack received another order. Same instructions, same floor. His phone buzzed, screen flickering with the notification. This time, he brought a flashlight, a voice recorder, and his phone camera. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the phantom button once more. When the doors opened, the 13th floor seemed even darker than before. The corridor stretched on endlessly, the walls now covered with deep scratches and handprints. A sticky, metallic smell filled the air. Inside the surgery observation room, he found a shape on the operating table, hidden under a stained white sheet. Hands trembling, Jack lifted the sheet. He gasped. It was him, his own body, cold, expressionless, a grotesque mirror. A chorus of voices rose behind him. He turned. Dozens of figures stood in the corners of the room, nurses, patients, doctors, all wearing cracked surgical masks. They stepped forward in perfect unison, chanting softly, "You came back. You belong here." Jack lunged for the door, but it slammed shut. The lights overhead pulsed like a heartbeat. He pounded on the door until his knuckles bled, but the masked figures only came closer. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him up was his own face on the operating table, eyes fluttering open. The next evening, the restaurant's delivery system pinged with a new order. 13th floor, surgery observation room, deliveryman Jack. But Jack was gone. Or rather, he was now part of the story that St. Mary's Hospital never stopped telling. Some nights, if you listen closely near the locked service elevator, you might hear a lone deliveryman's footsteps pacing endlessly, waving to deliver a meal that will never be eaten.
Thank you for watching Midnight Parables, where shadows speak and stories never end. Subscribe for more tales that blur the line between myth and memory.